All right. Good morning, everybody.
Coming.
Good morning, everybody.
Oh, there goes everything.
Today is Daf Kuf Chaf Zayin. We are at the very top of Kuf Chaf Zayin. I think Rav Shizbi Amar. I think that's where we left off. Tumtum. So if you recall, at the end of yesterday's blog, we actually had a kind of a bullet point series of halachas. What? We had a bullet point series of halachas about what happens when you have a tumtum. The one, Kuf Chaf Zayin. Kuf Chaf Zayin. We got about 10 more.
Sorry.
Yes, please. That'd be fantastic. My coffee this morning was lukewarm. I don't know what happened. Splenda, a little bit of creamer.
Not mixed up again.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
Tumtum is before.
So yeah, tumtum again is a child that's born, an androgynous, which is also going to come up in today's block, is a child that's born with kind of simane of both a zakar and an akeva. A tumtum is someone with some sort of membrane that covers the osamakom, and therefore you just literally do not know if this child is a boy, if this child is a girl. And we had a series of halachas yesterday at the end of the daf for various reasons, various different halachas. What is the status? So the one that was nogea to us yesterday, it's going to come up again in today's block, was if you have a tumtum, and then the tumtum was the oldest child of this father, right? And you don't know if it's a boy or a girl. And then at some point during the child's lifetime, you realize that it was a boy. Yes, some sort of surgery, whatever it is, So Rav Ami said a halacha that child is not a bachar for purposes of pishnai. Then we digress. There were other halachas. Also can't be a ben or a mora. Other ways of computing the pishnai for other children, whatever. Now we're up to the fourth halacha. Rav Shizbi Amar, this is the third line from the top. Kuf Chav Zayin Amar Aleph. Rav Shizbi Amar, Af Eno Nimol Lishmona. So this is the psukim in the beginning of Parshas Tazria says that the Beryl Bnei Yisrael Lemor Ishaki Tazria B'Yol Zakar B'Tama Shabbat Kumin. The very next pasuk says, "V'yomashmini yimol b'sar or loso." The Gemara in Shabbos says that. What do we learn from there? Bris Milah is chilul Shabbos. We're not allowed to make anyone bleed on Shabbos. I don't know. I mean, I trust your judgment. Is there blood when there's a bris? I never get too close.
Depends which mile.
It depends which mole you have, but very often there is blood. So the truth is that bris Milah, and that's why generally we have a pasuk that says that bris Milah is docha Shabbos. But again, we take that very seriously. It's only if it's a bris milah bismano, and it's not if it's bein hashmashos and whatever it is, right? So this is another halacha where if you have a tumtum, even if by day, is that right? Also, it's not. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, C-section.
But so the point is, let's say you have a child that's born a tumtum on day 4. We realize they did some surgery, whatever it is. I don't know if this is no game, so don't. I don't know. But the point is, in the times of the Gemara, somehow you were able to figure out prior to day 8 that the child is a boy, and day 8 happens on Shabbos. That boy's bris will not be docha Shabbos. You'll wait till Sunday, assuming the child's healthy enough. Okay, so that's another halacha. So the pasuk says, "Damar kra isha ki tazria v'yolda zachar u'b'yom hashmini yimol ad zachar mishas leida." Rav Shravya Omer, af ein imo tuma tamea leida. Not only that, thank you very much. Not only that, but the mom of this child doesn't have the regular halachas of tuma leida. So the beginning of Parshas Tazria Matzorah is really all about Taras, right? But the very beginning has to do with tuma leida, and these are halachas that really aren't. They're not really nogea today. But the way it worked on the D'Oraisa level when women had babies was, let's say, depending on if you had a boy or a girl, there was a whole separate halachas of how they did tumah. So, for example, a boy, the woman would be tameh for 7 days. Then there would be a 33-day period where she would be tar, meaning any dam that came out would not be considered, damida or something like that. She would be tahar, and then after day 40, she would bring karbanos, and then she'd be good. If it was a girl, it would be 14 days, then a 66-day period, and on day 80, she would bring her karbanos. But the point is this such like a funny, I don't know. But the point is that what Rav Shravya was saying was if the child was a tumtum, so it wasn't a zakar, it wasn't an akeva, it was a tumtum, the woman is just not subject to these halachas. Okay, So the Amar Kra, how do I know? Because the same pasuk in the beginning of Parshas Tazria says the Amar Kra Isha ki Tazria b'yalda zachar. It's only if she gives birth to a zachar. B'tama Shabbos Yemim. Ashehe zachar b'shas leida. And the Rashbam explains the very next pasuk, or two psukim later, says if she has a girl, then the halachas are as follows. So it's not slavavka zachar, but the point is it's zachar, then the halachas are like this. Nekeva, the halachas are like that. If you're a tumtum and you're not a zachar or a nekeva, and again, even if it turns out that pretty soon you realize what the child is, you're still not subject to these halachas. So again, what was the last halacha that we said? In 1 second. Yeah. But again, what was the halacha? The halacha was that if a child is born a tumtum, the woman, the mom, is not subject to these laws, these special unique laws of tumas leida. The Gemara says, is that true? Meisevei, this is a brisa in Nida, where the sugyas really come up. Hama pella tumtum androgynous. If a woman unfortunately miscarries and the child was a tumtum and an androgynous, for our purposes, the miscarriage isn't the important. It's even if you give birth to a healthy child that's a tumtum or an androgynous. Teshev lezachar ulanakeva. The brisa Nida says that it's not that she's not subject to these halachas; it's the exact opposite. We take the chumras of a zachar and an akeva, meaning she starts off being tummy for 14 days, not only 7, and her yemei tara are treated as if the child was a boy, meaning she's only tahar until day 40. So instead of having 33 days of tara, she only has 26 days of tara. This is like the most chumr machmir of both worlds. So how can you tell me, Rav Shravya, that the woman isn't subject to tumas leida at all? If anything, it's the exact opposite. She's subject to like the most stringent tumas leida. Yeah. The Gemara says tiyufta, Rav Shravya tiyufta. You're right. It's got to be a tiyufta. But the Gemara says, wait 1 second. If Rav Shravya is wrong, and the psukim at the beginning of Tazria aren't saying what he thought they were saying, lema tehabi tiyufta Rav Shizbi as well. Rav Shizbi learned the very same psukim from Parshas Tazria to say that this tumtum wouldn't have a bris on Shabbos. And he's darshaning from the same psukim at the beginning of Tazria. So if the psukim don't mean what Rav Shravya wanted it to mean, maybe it also doesn't mean what Rav Shizbi. The Gemara's answer. The Gemara's going to say, the Gemara, so Alan's done this before. You know, he comes in and, okay, but the bottom line is, the Gemara says, Tana spuke misafkale ulachumra. Maybe not. Maybe all the Tana is saying is we really don't know, and therefore we have to be machmer that the child is a boy or a girl, and for the same reason, you're not going to give the child a bris on Shabbos. Maybe when it comes to biyom hashmini yimol basar laso, it's only like we said. If there's any reason why we wouldn't have the bris on Shabbos, you won't do the bris on Shabbos. Maybe this is another reason that, again, a bris in theory shouldn't be docha Shabbos. A bris should be pilul Shabbos. We have a pasuk that says that it can be docha Shabbos in the right circumstances. Maybe if a child's born a tumtum, that is another reason why the bris wouldn't happen on Shabbos, just like there was a miscarriage, just like there was a C-section or something like that. Okay. But the Gemara says, if what you're telling me is that a woman has the chumras of tumas leida of a zachar and a nekeva, and that's what's going on over there, so teshev lezachar ula nekeva ula nida mibayale. So then why are there even any period of tahar? Meaning even from days 14 through 40, why don't we assume that maybe she's a nida? Maybe it wasn't a zachar, wasn't a nekeva, it was a nida, and then she just wouldn't be tahar at all until she has, shivan nekim or something like that. Whenever that happens, right? So the Gemara says, Kaja, I hear, all right, very good. But the point is, that is the end of the first part of our sugya. So again, what was the very first halacha in the whole list of bullet points about the tumtum? Was that if you have a tumtum that turns out he was a zachar and he was a bachar, he still doesn't get pishnayim. So Amar Rava Tanya Kavasei Rav Ami. We have a brisa that supports that halacha of Rav Ami because the pasuk says, and this is in Pi Seitze, the pasuk says, Ki tiena le'eshtein Hashem achas ahuva v'achas tenua v'yoldu lovanim ha'ahuva v'asnua. So he has 2 different wives. They each have children. Vayahaben habachar lasnia. And the wife that he doesn't like, the snia, has a ben habachar. So Rava says like this: there's a brisa that supports this halacha that a tumtum never gets pishnayim. The brisa says as follows: ben velo tumtum. When the pasuk in Kisei says ben, it means a ben and not a tumtum. And bachar velo sapik. And when the pasuk says bachar, it means a bachar and not a sapik bachar. So what Rava is trying to say is this brisa is a mafurish brisa that seems to say we have a drasha that when the pasuk says ben, there's obviously some extra word that we're darshaning. Ben below tumtum, and that means that when you have a tumtum, the tumtum doesn't take pishnayim. So the Gemara says, wait 1 second. Bishlama ben below tumtum. I can appreciate the first part of that brisa, ben below tumtum. Kid Rav Ami. This is the halacha that Rav Ami was teaching us that a tumtum doesn't take pishnayim. Ela b'char v'lo safek. What do you mean to tell me that only a b'char takes pishnayim and not a safek b'char? Lafuke mai. Just in general, if you have a safek b'char, that means just think of the case. You have a child that's a safek b'char, and then a bunch of brothers. The bunch of brothers are saying you're not a b'char, therefore you're not taking pishnayim. And I guess he's saying he's a safek b'char. Just regular case of Kosher Mishpah would tell you like, why do we need a pasuk to say that a safek b'char doesn't take pishnayim? Why would anyone think that a safek b'char does take pishnayim? It's on the b'char to prove that he's a real b'char, right? So what is this Bryce even trying to teach us? What's the halacha that the Bryce is coming to teach us? So the Gemara says, La'afuke minadarish Rabba. It's coming to exclude a halacha that Rabba himself taught. The Darish Rabba, shtei nashim sheyaldu beis harim b'machabeh. Let's say you have, in those days, men had multiple wives. So you could see a situation where a man had two wives. They weren't together, right? They were in different places, and they both had children right around the same time. And in those days, they didn't have the same birth certificates that we have today that have a date, a time of birth, and they literally do not know what to do, right? Which one is the bachar? It's only one of the two, right? So what Rava says, what do you do? Kosvin harsha zelazeh. So again, the situation would be you have two different mothers, right? And therefore you have two different children. One of them is the bachar. We don't know which one. And then there's brothers 3, 4, and 5. And now the father dies and they have a whole dispute. Which is the one that has to get pishnayim? It's clearly going to be either brother 1 or 2. One of the two. We don't know which one. And then there's 3, 4, and 5. Brothers 3, 4, and 5 are saying, I don't know, let us know which one it is and we'll give that one pishnayim. But until you tell us which one it is, no one's getting pishnayim. So Rava says, what do we do? Brothers 1 and 2 can hire an attorney and they can make a little deal and they say, listen, one of them act as the bachar. If you're the real bachar, wonderful. If you're not the real bachar, in my stead, brother 2 will say to brother 1, I'm giving you power of attorney, collect the pishnayim and we'll split it. Listen, that's better than none of us getting it, right? So we'll split it.
So they'll split
the extra portion. And Rava says this makes a lot of sense, right? If we know it's one of the two, we don't know which one, so let them split it essentially. And this is the harsha, is just the way of the legal mechanics of how this will work. But the point is, what the Gemara is saying is when the Brisa says habachar below safek bachar, it's coming to exclude this case. Rava thought this was a very clever idea. Comes along the Brisa to say that no, this doesn't work. The only way a bachar takes pishnayim is if he's a full-fledged. We know exactly who he is. The other brothers 3, 4, and 5 have a right to say you don't get pishnayim until we know exactly you are the bachar. Don't give me these legal whatever. I don't care about your lawyer. That's not how this works. Okay.
But one of them is the bachar.
Well, that until you can prove which one it is, you're not entitled to pishnayim. That's what brothers 3, 4, and 5. That's what this Bryce is coming to say. Because you're right. It logically would make a lot of sense, right? But the Bryce says no. That's not how this works. You have to know that you're the bachar, or else you're not entitled to pishnayim. So Amalei Papa Rava, just a bit of a side note. For Papa says to Rava, he says this halacha that you just taught. I mean, are you sure about this? V'sholach Ravin. But we have, Ravin would say that Davar Zesha Alti L'chol Rabosai, and he asked every one of his Rabbanim, B'lo Amr Li Davar, Ram Kach Amr Mishum Rabbi. But this was the halacha that was said by Rabbi, that Hukru Ulubasofnis Arvu, when you have a Bachar that you knew at one point, everyone knew who the Bachar was, and then there was some sort of situation, for whatever reason, there was confusion, that's Kospanar Shah Zelazah. That's when those two Bachars, meaning we all know that at one point we knew, right, in the hospital, we knew which one was born first. Then, I don't know what happened, but at some point they got mixed up, right? Maybe they were twins or something like that. So at one point we all knew. And they got mixed up. Now we don't know. But we know it's one of the two twins, right? It's clearly them. That's when you can do this harsha business. Below hukru, ain't kos and harsha zelas. But in Rava's case, where you have two women in different hospitals and literally no one knows which one was first, even then, even Rav Yana said that is not a case where you would do the harsha. And after Rava heard that, Hadar Oki Rava Amora Allah, Rava then set up, a speaker so that an olden day speaker, not like a today's speaker, like a literal person, right, to give shir. And Vidarash, and he said, Dvarim Shamarti Lechem Taos came biyadi. He said, listen, I'm sorry, I gave shir, I was mistaken. Bram Kach Amrim Shem Rav Yanai, that Hukru Ulbasov Nisarvu Kos Harsha Zelazet. The case where we would do this harsha thing is only where we knew who the Bachar was at one point, and then they got confused. But lo hukru, but it was really a case where we just never knew. Ain kosvin harsha zeh la zeh. Okay.
Like in the case of identical twins.
Something like that. Like maybe there was a case of identical twins, but listen, the nurse and the mom, they definitely knew at one point. They put a red thing around the kid's arm. This is the Bachar, and then I don't know, an hour later it came off. Now no one knows. So, okay. So Sholchu le b'nei Akra de Agma l'Shmuel. So the people of this town, they sent a question to Shmuel. L'lamdeinu Rabbeinu, hayu muchlakim b'zeshu b'char. Let's say we have a chazaka that a certain person is the b'char. The Amar Aviv al Achar, and then the father comes along and says, by the way, now he's like on his deathbed, and now it really matters. And he says, by the way, that's not my b'char. This kid's a my b'char. So Amar Aviv al Acher b'charhu. So Mahu, what do we do in a situation like this? So again, we have a chazaka that this one kid is a b'char, comes along the father, and he says someone else is a b'char. What do we do? So Shalach lahu. So Shmuel said back, Kosvin harsha zeh this eitzah that, you know what, I don't know, you have two kids, let them split it. Let's do this legal thing and they'll split it. So the Gemara says, what's going on here? Wait a second. Manasha. Ikra banan svir le l'shalach lu karabanan. Ikra Yehuda svir le l'shalach lu Kreb Yehuda. So if you pass like the Rabbanan, just pass like the Rabbanan. If you pass, why this middle ground? Now, if you're wondering who in the world is Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan, the Gemara is going to get there. But the point is, clearly this was a shaila that the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda had, and they argued, and one said one way and one said the other way, and Shmuel was just going in the middle. Like, what's Shmuel doing? So the Gemara says, Misafkale ikra Yehuda, ikra Rabbanan, because he was Masafik. Whether we pass like Rabbi Yehuda or the Rabbanan, so he said, split the baby. I mean, kind of literally, actually. So just split it. Split the Bechorah. So the Gemara says, okay, so clearly there's this machlokas Rabbi Yehuda. Sorry. Clearly there's this machlokas Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan. What is this machlokas Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan? Did Tanya? We have a brisa. This brisa in Yivamis and Kedushin. So the pasuk says, this is the pasuk also in Ki Seitze, I believe. This is in that beginning of the Parshas Ki Seitze. Ki asa b'char ben asnua yakir. That's what the pasuk says. So if the b'char of the snua you like recognize, so yakirenu la'acherim. So there's a drasha that says that the father has the ability to basically say, this is my b'char. Mikan am Rabbi Yehuda, neman adam lomar zebeni b'char. A father has a certain emanus to say that this child is my b'char. Ukshem neman adam lomar zebeni b'char. And just like the father can say, this is my b'char. Hach neman adam lomar zeben grushav zeben chalutza. A Kohen has the nemanus to say that this child is a chalal, right? The mother of this child, Cohen was a Cohen, right? Was someone I wasn't supposed to marry, and therefore this child is a chalal. Maybe he's just feeling guilty, and he's like, oh, no one should like let this kid duch him, whatever it is. You know what I mean? Yeah, I don't know, but maybe he just doesn't like him.
It's also interesting that father can do it because that's not 100%. The mother would be 100%. It's not obviously he's father. You can't prove you're the father unless you do the DNA test, so to speak.
Maybe they did a DNA test. No, I don't know. You're right. I don't know.
Yeah, this is.
Yeah.
Believe you call him the other way.
What?
Believe you call him the other way. He's saying he's not.
These are some intense sugyas, right? And again, clearly over here, what's going on is there's some sort of chazaka the other way, right? Like there's an assumption that this kid is not a chalal. Comes along the father and he says he is a chalal, right? And if you remember, there's 8 echads. Like these are like very intense sugyas in Yavamas, right? But the point is, what we need for today is that Rabbi Yehuda says that a father has a certain amanus. This is what the pasuk says, yakir yakirenu lacherim, that a father has an amanus to say that this child is my bechar. Chachamim omer meino neman. I want to say no, you're not believed. And again, you have to assume that there's some sort of chazaka the other way. Why would the chacham say that a father's not believed? Like if no one knows, if you just show up to town one day and you're like, by the way, this is my bechar, why would anyone not believe the father? So clearly there's no edus because the father would never believe over the edim, but there's got to be some chazaka or something. And that's the discussion between Rabbi Yehuda and the chachamim. But again, the point is that that when this question came to Shmuel, he kind of paskined in the middle, and that's what the Gemara was saying. Like paskin, like either the Rabbanan or Rabbi Yehuda. What's this Harsha business? Either way, Amarle Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak the Rava. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak hears his Bryce and he says to Rav, says Bishlam Rabbi Yehuda. Hanur said Yakir. Rabbi Yehuda has a pasuk. He says Yakir Ekron Lachir. El Rabbanan Yakir Lamali. If they don't hold Rabbi Yehuda's drasha, so what do they do with Yakir? So the Gemara says, B'tzarech Hakera. You're right. Forget everything I just said before. I said obviously there's got to be some situation where there's a chazaka. No, but what the Rabbanan learned from Yakir is even where there isn't a chazaka. A father has a certain amanus to say about a child, this kid is my bechar. Father shows up to town, And he says, this kid's my Bachar, he has a certain nemanas. The Gemara says, Lamai Hilchasa. I mean, like, why, what are we talking about? Lemisbala Pishnaim is the whole point, just so that we give this child Pishnaim of the father's estate, Lo Yeheya La'acher, right? He should just be like anybody else. Ilu Bai Lemisbale Matana, Milo Yaib, like, the father can just give his money to whoever he wants. So the same way a father can just give his money to Eddie Stopek, why shouldn't he be able to say, this child's my Bachar, and then therefore give him Pishnaim? So, like, again, if not for the fact that there's got to be some chazaka the other way, and that's what Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan are arguing about, what in the world are the Rabbanan, what's the chiddush that they're trying to teach us? Mara says, no, let's say the father says he's 90 years old, and he says, this child's my Bachar, and he ends up living another 10, 15 years, and the father goes out of town, and now he dies, and there's all sorts of, his assets grew, and this and that, and the question is, fine, I get that everything that was in his possession until the time he was 90 when he said this, but what about everything else? Could we necessarily rely on what the father said, that this kid's the Bachar? If the whole reason we're believing the father is this migu, that he could have given it to him as a matana, fine, that's what he had in his ability to give as a matana. But whatever happened to this father over the last 10 years, he couldn't have given as a matana, it wasn't his, right? So maybe we should say that the Bachar only gets, that which the father was around for. But that which he wasn't around for, right, maybe that shouldn't go to the Bachar. So the Gemara says, fine, but Ulra Meir.
But Pishnaim is only for what the father has at the time.
Well, he's alive. Let's say the father's alive, but he moves to Florida because he's old. So he moves to Florida. Right now we're in Chicago, right? But there's property that the father didn't have at the time he moved to Florida. So it's not a question of Roy and Muksuk. The father's alive when he got all this stuff. But the question was, he couldn't have given it as a matana because it wasn't his at the time to give as a matana. If the whole reason the father has namanas to say who's the Bachar is this, believe him when he says he's a Bachar because he could have given him the gift anyway, right? But he couldn't give him this gift because he only got this gift after he made the statement that the child was a Bachar. So maybe we only believe the father that this child is a Bachar relative to what the father owned at the time. But anything that he got after that, maybe doesn't have nemanas.
Yeah, doesn't matter. The guy didn't know that he had something. The guy before would still get Pishnaim.
But how do we know he's the Bachar? That's the question. How do we know he's the Bachar? We only know he's the Bachar because the father said so. But the only reason the father has the nemanas is because the father could have given it to him anyway. But the father can't give him what he doesn't know he has, or what he doesn't have. Literally, he doesn't have. These are stuff that he got later. So he couldn't give it to him. So you're right. If on his deathbed he reiterates, this kid was my Bachar, fine. But let's say he doesn't. So Mechatesi that this Bachar should get all of this, all of this stuff. But either way, the Gemara says fine. But Ula Rav Meir, Damar Adam Makna Davar Shaloba Olam, Yakir Lamali. But this all works according to the Rabbanan. Rav Meir says that a person can be Makna Davar Shaloba Olam. So this person, prior to moving to Florida, could have given a matana. He could have said, this kid, I want him to have everything that I have now and everything that I'm going to get in the future. And that would have worked. So according to Rav Meir, what do we do with Yakir? This previous answer is not going to work. The Gemara says, all right, we'll say it's different ukimta. It's the chasim that fell when this person was a ghost face, and even Rav Meir is going to say that davar makne, davar shlobel olam only works midin. I could have later given it to you, and therefore now I can be kona things that I don't even own anymore. But there's no question. Even Rav Meir is going to agree that I can never be makne something that at the time that I get it, I would not have had the ability to be makne to you. If I was a ghost face, then I can't perform a kinyan. So that even Rav Meir is going to say that adam makne davar shelo bala olam has its limits. So we'll just make an ukimta that this is property that the father got when he was a ghost face. And then again, that's what Yakir is coming to teach me. Okay, so really we should stop here, but we'll just go to the end of the blot. It's a new sugya, and it's relatively straightforward from here. Tana Rabbanan, let's say we have a child, and everyone is Reuven, right? Reuven has released the Shimon Alevi. Reuven's clearly the Bachar. So we know Reuven's the Bachar. And then the father says, actually, Shimon's the Bachar. What? So Neman, he's Neman. This sounds very much like Rabbi Yehuda, that a father has the right to say, he has, the pasuk says, Yakir Lafir, the father can say that Shimon's the Bachar. So the Brisa continues. The Brisa continues. Let's say we had a child who was not the Bachar, Shimon. Fa'amar Aviv Bacharhu, and now the father says Shimon actually is the Bachar. Eino Neman, the father's not going to be believed. You can't even read these two lines together. It's literally the exact same case, just the reverse, right? In the first case, we said the father's believed to say that Shimon's the Bachar. And in the second case, we said the father's not believed to say that Shimon's the Bachar. So the Gemara says, what's going on? Reisha, Rabbi Yehuda, V'Seifa, Rabban. You're going to have to say that. You don't like to say this, but you're going to have to say that. The Reisha is Rabbi Yehuda, and the Seifa is going like the Rabban. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Amar benihu. Let's say you're talking about a person, and you say, this is my child. B'chazar Amar Avdihu. And then you say, he's not actually my child. He's actually my Eved. That's a little weird, right? So the Gemara says Eino Neman. You're really not believed because there's no way to make that work. You would never refer to your Eved as your son. So from the fact that you first called him your son and now you're flipping and calling him your Eved, you must be lying about the Eved part. There must be some reason why you want to tell someone he's your Eved, but he's really your son. He's not your Eved. What about the reverse? Avdihu, you said about someone that he's your Eved, B'chazar v'amar benihu, and then later you flipped and said he's actually my son. Now, the father is believed to say he is my son. Why? Because you can explain away what the father meant to say. What he probably meant to say was, this is my son. Why did I refer to my son as my Eved? I mean it in a nice way, that my son treats me like he's my Eved. He's so good to me, he treats me like he's my Eved. So even though I called him my Eved, I didn't mean my Eved, literally. I meant he's my son. Why did I refer to him as an Eved? Because he treats me very nicely. Fine. But the Gemara says, B'chilu fei abeis hamechas. It's kind of funny. But the reverse is true if you're talking to the tax collectors. So the Gemara explains how you over al beis hamechas. Let's say you're going through the toll. Ba'amar benihu, b'chazar ba'amar avdihu. Now, I guess the way the halachas work is there was a lower tax if you had your children than if you had your property, right?
What kind of taxes?
And why? So the point is, you kind of have a reason to fudge the truth a little bit, right? It's reminiscent of olden day when I was younger. You go on a Holomoy trip and people are like, you're 7. There's a different, you're 7. You're like, no, I'm 8. No, you're 7. So it's kind of like what's going on over here, right? You're basically saying, this is my Eved, but you have a reason to refer to him as your son. So you got a better rate on whatever the thing is. And then when you go through the gate, you're like, no, he's really my Eved. You're telling the truth. You just had reason to kind of fudge the truth a little bit. But Amar Avdihu, let's say, and by fudge the truth, I mean lie completely. But the Amar Avdihu, but let's say you said he's my Eved, which would not be a very smart thing to say to the tax collector. B'chazar v'amar benihu, and then later you say he's my son, Eino Neman. Because again, there's no reason why you would lie like that. If anything, you're making it worse for yourself. But what's the bottom line? What we need for the next Gemara is Rabbi Yochanan said halacha, and he said like this: if you first refer to your son as your Eved, and then you say he's not my Eved, he's your son, you are believed. There's a reason why you would say that. You can refer to your son as your Eved simply because you're saying your son treats you very, very well. So Gemara says Meisveh. Here's a brisa that's going to be a kasha. Let's say people thought he was your son. You referred to him as your son. Ubava Amar Benihu, and you referred to him as your son. V'chazar Amar Avdihu Eino Neman. That's just like what Rabbi Yochanan said the first time. But if someone was like an Eved, Ubava Amar Avdihu, and you referred to him as your Eved, V'chazar Amar Benihu Eino Neman, and then you referred to him as your son, Eino Neman. This is not like what we said earlier. Normally, if you refer to someone as an Eved, and then you say your son, you are believed. But here, this brisa says that if you refer to someone as an Eved, and then you say he's your son, you are not believed. So what's going on? You're not just referring to him as your slave. You're basically referring to him as the slave that I bought for $100, right? My meitzar meitzar avda kazuzi, kuf zuzi. You're saying he's like the Eved that cost me, whatever, 100 zuz. That's very derogatory. I mean, even if you wanted to say he's my son that kind of treats me very nicely like an Eved, you wouldn't be like, oh, he's my Eved that I bought in Slaver's Bay for $100. It's a little weird to refer to your son that way. And therefore, if you refer to your son or a person that way, clearly, and then later you refer to him as your son, there's some reason why you would be doing that, but you are not telling the truth. Shkayach, I will, oh my.